Hey everybody, KC here. So, still in Colorado, still at WAFC, having a terrific time. So let me give you a little bit of a rundown on what today has been all about. I'm reporting this on Monday, and we started out with Nancy Lebold, CEO of New Seasons Market, welcoming everybody to the convention. It was the very first general session, and talking about how we're not very far from the continental divide. But in fact, this is a show that brings everybody together. And I thought that was a really, really interesting image. And from then we moved on really specifically to the thing that really binds everybody who comes to WAFC. And that's an enthusiasm for education. I think I talked a little bit about this yesterday. Paul Gianetto from Raley's talked about how over the years, WAFC and its members have basically contributed $40 million in scholarships for students from the industry who want to go back to school to learn more about how to be leaders, how to be better members of the food industry. And that's really extraordinary. It's the 66th year of the Food Industry Management Program at USC, and they've had an incredible run and an incredible track record in terms of the kinds of people it has turned out who have taken on major positions in the industry. And Mike Hendry of Northgate Market, he talked a little bit about how the new challenge for educators and the industry is to figure out how to recraft educational programs that are going to be relevant for the next generation of leaders. And now listen, there's still going to be programs where people will go to USC for 3 months for an intensive training and where they're going to learn and really do deep dives in terms of the industry. But Mike was making the point that they also need short and relevant educational programs, bite-sized programs that align with today's consumer demands. Consumers meaning specifically retailers and the people who work for them. It was really interesting. They were talking a little bit about the people who come out of the FIM program. Traditionally, they are people who tend to stay at the companies where they work longer, the companies that sponsored them to go there. They have greater loyalty. They tend to make something like 33% higher salaries over the long term, and they're 3 times more likely to end up being either senior leaders or executives in various companies in the food industry. So it really does pay dividends. From then, we moved on to one of the teams of students that has just graduated from the USC FIM program, basically making their capstone presentation. And this was really, really interesting because what they were studying was how seaweed can be used as an alternative to plastics. And they had some really, really fascinating stuff. They called themselves Team Seawise, and that was fascinating. And and basically their position was that 75% of consumers are demanding sustainability moves like this. And they addressed the idea that basically using seaweed as a replacement for plastics in packaging is viable, it's scalable, and over the long run, it will be cost effective. It's a little bit more expensive right now, but as more people do it and as the technology gets better, the cost is very quickly going to come down, and that the retailers and manufacturers that invest early are going to end up having a first mover advantage. And listen, there's no question that grocery is a significant contributor to pollution, especially plastics pollution. So this is something the industry, I think, has both an economic incentive as well as a moral imperative to address. And by the way, there's a really good reason to do it because more and more states are starting to address this issue and create regulations. There are 4 states that have them and 9 states that are considering them. And if the industry can get out in front of some of that legislation, they'll be in a much better place to do it. And over the long term, they will decrease costs, they'll improve brand perception, and basically by anticipating global regulation, they're going to be able to be the perception is going to be better, and the delivery of the product is going to be better. And then after a time, there was a really interesting motivational speech by Ryan Leaf. I may talk about that another time. Then we moved on to some of the town halls, where again, retailers had an opportunity in a large format setting to talk to the various vendors who are here and lay out some of their strategies, some of their plans, some of their initiatives, and quite frankly, the ways they would like some of these vendors to participate. it was really interesting to hear from Save Mart companies, and they were talking about how they're really trying to ramp up their innovation quotient, if you will, trying to figure out ways where they can be innovative, and how they're making multiple investments across the company to figure out how to do this better. One of the things that Chris Hooks, an executive with Save Mart, talked about is, he said, we need to be scrappy and we need to be ferocious. And I really, really liked that. I thought that was really, really interesting. And he made the point that traditionally Save Mart has not been a leader in anything, and they are bound and determined to change that image and change that reality. They know they're playing catch up, but they're making the investments that are going to make a real difference. And then there was a conversation with Stater Brothers, and basically they were stressing what they like to call cognitive agility, but they also recognize the fact that this is not something they have traditionally done well, and they basically, like, they talked about their two years into e-commerce. He says, hey, we were late to the game, but it's already 6% of sales are digital. They're focusing more on loyalty, to know more about the customers that are coming into their stores and buying from them online. They say, yes, we're late to the party, but we are growing. And they are looking for a first-to-market opportunities more than they ever have before, and that's one of the things they're appealing to vendors about. But listen, it seems to me there's a real creative tension here in some ways, because on the one hand, they are focusing on trying to be more innovative. They're trying to do things they have not traditionally done, but they're still focusing on things like what they call OMI, one more item, OMC, one more customer. And that tends to be transaction focused. And yet, by focusing on things like loyalty, they're also thinking in terms of lifetime customer value. It's going to be really interesting to see how they kind of navigate the creative tension there. And then finally, and this is great, the folks from Northgate Markets were there. They were talking about the Mercado, which is something we did a lot on in Morning Newsbeat. I'll put a link in the text so you can see the story that we did about it. And they were talking a little bit about what they're trying to do with that store, and how that in some ways is representative of the kinds of innovations that they're going to be focused on. And not that every store that they open, and they're planning to open 3 to 5 stores a year, by no means will every store be a Mercado. In fact, very few of those stores are going to resemble each other. They're going to be different stores for different kinds of locations. There may eventually be another Mercado, but they want to use that as a laboratory where they can take from it and apply the lessons in other kinds of stores, in other kinds of markets. And I thought that was really, really interesting. The thing I really like about them is they talk very specifically about their vision and their approach, and they talk about being authentic Mexican food experience. That's what they want to be, and they really don't want to look broader than that. And they believe, and I think this is a really good observation, that that's going to appeal to people who are not just Mexican, and that's certainly what I found when I was at the store. Hey, listen, there was one thing that they talked about, which I thought was fascinating, and I want to end with this today. There was a word I had never heard before, and it's called Sobre Mesa. And Mike Henry said Sobre Mesa is basically what happens after a great meal with family, friends, and the dishes have been cleared away, and you're sitting around the table and you're talking, and maybe you're having a glass of tequila, or maybe you're having a glass of wine, and it's that moment of community that takes place, satisfied community. And Sobre Mesa, that's such a great word. And it seems to me, even though that's not the act of eating, it's what comes after eating, that's the thing that's so magic about what the food industry at its best can offer its consumers, okay? To help them prepare meals, nurture their families, nurture and feed their friends, and achieve a level of Sobre Mesa. So much of a state of mind. It's just really, really interesting. Anyway, that's my day at WAFC. I'll be back tomorrow. I'll be interested to talk about it, because that's where I'm going to be moderating a panel on leadership with some really interesting people. It's going to be a great day. I'm looking forward to telling you about it. That's what's on my mind. And as always, I want to hear what's on your mind.